Steve, I am so low right now. This Afrezza's got my blood sugars like...
Me too, dude. How many units did you toke for that?
Like freaking 40, dude.
It's been nice knowing you.
No, dude. I'm so good. I feel good. Oh my God. Here's an idea. Why don't they put the Afrezza in the Doritos? Then you can eat as many as you want.
Whoa. Dude, that was a good idea.
Yeah.
I'm gonna let those folks at Mankind know. Hey.
But you know what? I've been taking this all day long and I actually don't feel that stoned, do you?
Now that you think about it, no, I don't. Hey, where's that smoke coming from?
Oh, the van's on fire. Let's get the hell out of here.
All right, so Steve and I made it out of that van just in time before it blew for me to come and give you a talk on inhaled insulin, Afrezza, and other new insulins, new rapid-acting insulins, new basal insulins. I'm going to spend the majority of the time on the inhaled insulin because it's significantly different and requires a lot of education about how to use it kind of appropriately. So let's start with inhaled insulin. So first of all, you know, how rapid is our current rapid-acting insulins? And what I mean by rapid-acting insulins, everybody uses these, Humalog, Novolog, Apidra. How fast are they? And the answer is, give me a freaking break. They are really, really slow. So keep in mind, when the beta cells secrete insulin, it gets right into the bloodstream within seconds. And it can get out of the bloodstream within minutes. So it really is, the beta cells are just fantastic thermostats for controlling blood sugars. It's pretty amazing. And when we inject our rapid-acting insulin subcutaneously, they take 30 minutes to even start to work, an hour and a half to 2 hours to peak, and then they hang around for 5 hours. So, you know, non-diabetics controlling blood sugar is just this like fine-tuned second-by-second modulation, and we are like, you know, trying to steer the Titanic, and we run into icebergs. That was a great metaphor. So, how does this happen practically? Why is this a problem? Well, this is my CGM a while ago, and this is what happens. That sometimes, you know, your blood sugar is 300. Who knows why? Maybe you ate something and forgot to bolus. Maybe your pump wasn't working, whatever. And you look at it, and that it doesn't feel good to be high. It's emotionally, it's not fun because you're looking at these high numbers and you're thinking, gosh, I'm just, you know, I want to be back in range. So in this case, you know, I gave myself 3 units. Guess what? You know, an hour or so goes by, nothing happened, another 3 units, and then you do what we call a rage bolus. You get pissed and you just, you know, haul off and give yourself, you know, another big bolus. I think 8 units is, for me, was still probably less than I actually did. So now I've got, you know, multiple units on board. Guess what? They all kick in eventually, and then you're like, oh crap, and you have to eat carbs. And this is part of the reason why type 1 diabetes is so hard, why we're on this roller coaster, is because we don't have sharp enough tools to help control the ups and downs. That you know, bolus because nothing's happening, and then you crash. And then you eat everything in the fridge and you go high, and then you go, oh crap, and you do another rage bolus. And it can make you get on that roller coaster. So having something more truly rapid on, rapid off is meaningful. Now, this example I like to show for a different reason. And, you know, when I made this talk, I realized I should have put in pictures of me with like perfect days, so you don't think I'm a complete, you know, screw up. But guess what? You know, I get highs, I get lows just like everybody, and I, you know, do my best to try to learn from them, and try not to, you know, just judge and blame myself for when it does happen. So I ate a burrito bowl, and, you know, this was in the evening, 10 p.m. or so, and I was happy about it because there's no real carbs in that. You know, it didn't have the tortilla, it had meat and cheese and sour cream and all these kinds of things. But then, you know, I realized that my blood sugars were probably going to go up because of this fat and protein stuff. So I gave myself a 10-unit bolus, and look what happened to my blood sugars. They went through the roof. And the point about this, though, is that this is from, let's say, maybe 1 a.m. to, you know, waking up the next day, 7 a.m. I didn't wake up and bolus. So the time course of this insulin actually ended up being okay. And had I been up, during the day, I definitely would have taken a huge another slug of insulin and brought myself definitely crashing low. So this bolus was right. It eventually got my blood sugars down to where I wanted it to be, but it's just not acting really kind of at the time I want it to act. So the point is that even when you get the bolus right to get it kind of back down into range, it can take hours for it to come back into range. So it's so slow, 5 to 6 hours later. So what's Afrezza and how can it help? Well, this is what the inhaler looks like. And this is not my hand, but you can see this is actually the inhaler right here. And it just kind of cracks open and it has these little cartridges in it that I'll just put up here. And then you kind of just drop them in the inhaler, you clip it closed, and that's how you do it. It's really as easy as that. And I already used that one, so don't worry about me going low during this this talk. And this is a graphic of what I just showed you. The exception being that if you want to be more sanitary, it has this little cover that you can remove on and off that goes with it. So they come in 4, 8, and 12 unit cartridges. So that's the doses. It's not like you just click 1, 2, 3, 4 units. These are the increments that you can take. And I'm going to talk about a lot more how to do these boluses and how you can make this work for you. Given that we're used to taking sometimes half a unit or quarter unit. And you might be thinking, you're telling me I can only do 4, 8, or 12? How is that going to work? Well, I'm going to get to that. So they come in these different doses. And then when you get a prescription of them, let's say you get the 8 unit cartridges, they come in this big sleeve within a box. And then when you kind of have these blister packs that you can pop them out. So you can keep them in the fridge for a very long time. There's obviously an expiration date, but it's like insulin that if it's refrigerated, it's good for a very, very long time. And then they say when you take it out in these little packs, you can have it, I think it's either a week or 10 days outside of the fridge. And then once you puncture the blister pack, you can kind of carry it around at room temperature for 3 days. So to me, that's long enough that I'm never really worried about the insulin kind of going bad. And insulin in general is much more stable than we give it credit for. So this is just a blown up picture of what these kind of blister packs look like. Pop it out, put it in the thing, you're ready to go. So why is it cool? Well, I already kind of alluded to this, but this is in black circles is the time course of our rapid acting insulins, Humalog, Novolog, and Apidra. As I mentioned, they take half an hour or so to work. They peak in an hour and a half or so, and then they hang around 4 or 5 hours. This is 10 units of a rapid acting insulin. And compared to Afrezza, which has a much more rapid onset. So it gets into the system almost immediately. It peaks in a half an hour or so, and then it's out of the system in an hour and a half. So by the time that like your rapid acting insulin is peaking, Afrezza would have already peaked and gotten completely out of your system. So you can see that this time course is shifted way more to a rapid on, rapid off. So here's the rapid on, here's the rapid off. Both of those are important. Why? Because one, you want the insulin to be acting when the carbs are hitting your system. You know that when you eat carbs, they start affecting your blood sugar within 5-10 minutes. You need the insulin to be working immediately when you eat, especially carbs. And then you want it out of the system so it's not hanging around 5 hours when you're not eating to avoid a delayed hypoglycemic event. So this is still not what the normal human pancreas can do, but it's getting much closer. All right. Well, it starts working immediately, gone by 90 minutes. So remembering that is helpful. So a rapid correction with Afrezza, this is just, again, another example. This is one I was on, this I think the G4 Platinum or whatever it was. So this is like that square reader. So this was a little while ago. And you can see, again, my blood sugar went up high. Who knows why? Maybe my pump fell out or something like that. And I took 8 units. And the point here is 2 things. One, look how quickly that comes down. That's with one quote-unquote bolus. Now, if I did that with rapid acting insulin, I would bolus, and I would, maybe if I was lucky, 4 or 5 hours come, back into range. So quickly getting your blood sugars down under control. And then this is what Steve and I call kind of exit stage right, that if I notice this slope of decline with rapid acting insulin, I would start freaking out that I'm going to go low, whatever. But it gets out of the system very quickly, and blood sugars can stabilize. So it takes getting used to this kind of rapid decline. A couple things people ask: do you feel low when this happens? Not really. But what I love about it is correcting these stubborn highs and getting on with your damn day. You know, how frustrating is it? It ruins your day when your blood sugars are high and you're just battling them all day long. You're in meetings, whatever, looking at your CGM. When's my blood sugar coming down? Should I take another bolus? Is my insulin working? Is my pump failed? Blah, blah, blah. Take your 8 units, 12 units, whatever it is, bring your blood sugar down, get about your business. That means a lot. Okay, it's good to correct blood sugars fast, but what else can it be used for? High carb meals. I Googled high carb meal, I think, and Arnold Schwarzenegger eating a big, pile of spaghetti was one of the first things that came up. So I loved it. Or, candy, whatever it is. So, obviously carbs affect your blood sugar the fastest of all the macronutrients, faster than fat and protein, things like that. And most type 1s tend to avoid carbs to some degree. You can go full keto, but a lot of type 1s kind of gravitate towards this lower carb diet because carbs can be really hard to handle from a blood sugar standpoint. We have these things in San Diego called acai bowls, which I love. I don't even know what acai is. It's just it's a purple goop of fruit that's served with granola on top and berries and usually honey, sometimes peanut butter or coconuts. They're delicious, but I would never eat them because it was just like saying goodbye to your blood sugars for the day. But having something that can actually combat these higher carb meals or just any carbs is something that's really useful. So taking it at the start of a meal, you can actually do that. You can take it right when you sit down to eat or even 10 minutes after you start eating because it works so fast. I would never advise that for Humalog or Novolog, where we always tell patients bolus 20, 30 minutes before you eat. So high carbs or just carbs in general is a good place that Afrezza can be used. Proper technique. This is Steve demonstrating it on a plane ride the other day. This is a little bit more than the other day when you could be on a plane, A, and B, sit next to somebody. So Steve was going to demonstrate on a plane to me a proper technique. So let me play this video for you. You got to kind of look around. You can lift up your coat. And the mischievous wink is really important for absorption. You don't actually have to blow anything out, but you can for effect. So just good, proper technique as demonstrated there by Dr. Steve Edelman. All right, so let's get a little bit into dosing. I told you how it might be cool, might be something that you want to use or at least try. How do you dose it? So the most important thing to know is that it's not a unit-to-unit conversion. So 4 units of Afrezza is not equal to 4 units of Humalog or Novolog. It's not 1-to-1. 4 units of Afrezza is about 2.5 units of Humalog Novolog. So 8 units is about 5 units of Humalog Novolog. This, I think, is actually a good thing. Well, a couple things about this. One, I think it's good because if some of you really insulin sensitive folks are saying, gosh, 4 units is the lowest dose. That's too much for me. I don't know if I'll ever be able to use this. But if it's about 2.5, then yeah, that really opens the door for potentially using it. So the other important thing is that if you don't know this, you will constantly underdose yourself. So I always give the story of when I first took this, the very first time, it just like came out on the market. Steve and I got samples of it. We were showing our trainees how to use it. We both ate half a sandwich, and I took 4 units of Afrezza. So 4 units of Humalog Novolog would be about the right dose for half a sandwich for me. And so I did 4 units of Afrezza. And my blood sugars went up high, 220, 250, something like that. And I thought, this stuff doesn't work. And it wasn't that it wasn't working, it was just that I was massively underdosing myself. So if you don't know this conversion, you will be giving yourself too little insulin. But once you know this, you can say, okay, if it's really more like 2 units or so, then it gives you kind of a ballpark of what you might actually need for the carbs or the correction that you're doing. So 4 units, 2.5 units, that's kind of confusing. I just think of it as about half as potent, meaning 4 units is more like 2 units of Humalog Novolog. 8 units of Afrezza is more like 4 units of Humalog Novolog. That just kind of half is a lot easier to kind of do the math. If you want to be really kind of scientific about it and you want to give yourself a correction factor, you can. Our correction factors are always 1 unit will drop you 50 points or whatever. You can't do that same thing with Afrezza because it doesn't come in 1 unit increments. It only comes in 4 unit increments. So you need to kind of convert your conversion factor, your correction factor, or your sensitivity factor from 1 unit to 4 units. So let's just say, I am actually probably right around here that, I use 1 unit to lower my blood sugar by about 35 points. So with Afrezza, which is kind of like 2 units of Humalog Novolog, you basically just double whatever your correction factor is, so 70. So I would say that 4 units of Afrezza would drop me by about 70 milligrams per deciliter or so. I think it's actually a little bit less than that, but this will give you kind of a ballpark number. So basically just take your current sensitivity factor, whatever it is, double it, and that's ballpark of about what 4 units will drop your blood sugars, if that's helpful. Same thing with carb ratio. So I set it about 1 to 10, meaning 1 unit of insulin for every 10 grams of carbs. You double it, and that gives you an idea of what 4 units would do to cover carbs. Good ballpark place to start. Always have to kind of test these by trial and error. So how do we test these? I'll get to that. So, but when I use it, I tend to think of it like this. I've moved away from the carb counting and things like that, and I started thinking about it more qualitatively. So instead of 4 units for so many grams of carbs, I think of it as a 4-unit cartridge or a blue for a snack, something small, an apple, maybe a bag of chips. 8 units is more like the starting dose, at least for a sandwich or more of a typical meal. And then if I'm really going for it, I might do an 8 plus 4 or 12. There actually are 12-unit cartridges you can do. So I tend to think of it more in these buckets, less total carb counts. And for me, it's kind of small, normal, large in terms of the initial dose I would use with Afrezza for these typical or these kind of meals. So in doing so, I think it changes these block doses, 4, 8, 12. It takes it from a negative, like, gosh, it's so limited in what I can do, to I think it's somewhat of a positive of just broad strokes with diabetes. Treating diabetes how we normally would approach food in general. Nobody without diabetes really counts carbs or certainly doses insulin to the half unit. So being able to just be more systematic about it, small, medium, large, can be a little bit liberating actually. So from going from a quantitative carb-based approach to a qualitative approach, I found this picture. And a quantitative description would be very mathematical, very scientific. 23 males with average height of 61 inches, weight of 220 pounds, and age of 48. That's a quantitative description of these folks, which nobody really speaks like that, right? A qualitative approach would be, this is a bunch of drunk dudes dressed like Magnum PI. And that makes sense to us. You could look at this and just make a global assessment pretty quickly. So this approach is making it qualitative, making diabetes a bunch of drunk dudes, just making it more in the way that we kind of approach food and life in general in these kind of categories, rather than knowing the exact calculus to count carbs. All right, so a little bit more about dosing. So I mentioned it's rapid on, rapid off. Now the rapid off part is important because it enables you, one, to now dose again. If after an hour and a half your blood sugars are high or not where you want them to be, you can take another dose of Afrezza. I would never do that with Humalog or Novolog. I would wait at least 2, maybe even 3 hours to redose again so you're not stacking. But with Afrezza, you can feel pretty confident that it's out of your system. So this is just to show, a recent study that the makers of Afrezza did, where they did meal tests in inpatients and used aspart in this case, which is Novolog, and found that when they dosed them at the time of meal, that they had the kind of typical rise in their blood sugars, which eventually kind of come down. With Afrezza, they would actually let them redose again at 1 hour or 2 hour if their blood sugar was not where they wanted it to be. And you can see that you can get much more tight post-meal control. I mean, actually eating a meal and having your blood sugar go down, that's just unheard of with our kind of current rapid-acting insulins. And in this study, when people dosed, did these follow-on doses, were pretty aggressive with their dosing, they found that their time in range was better, about 2 more hours per day. Their post-meal blood sugars were better in general. So getting some data that this approach actually works. So what does this mean in practical terms? Well, for me, I take my first dose when I eat, and depending on how large it is, 4 units for me for a smaller meal, 8 units for regular, 12 for kind of a larger. And then right now, my high alarm is set at 160. It was set at 180. But if my CGM alarm goes off and it's been an hour or so since I ate, I'll take a follow-up dose. And that's usually another 4 unit or maybe sometimes an 8 unit little touch. And that can really turn those blood sugars around to bring you back into range instead of going up and up and up and up, and then you kind of come back down. So a lot of times with Afrezza, you will need to do this follow-on dose to get the most strict control. Alternatively, if you're on a pump, you could take your first dose of insulin through Afrezza, and then you can take some units at the same time via your pump to kind of control this late rise in blood sugar. So there's lots of different ways to use this. So when to give the follow-on dose, set your CGM alarm. I would say initially for 180, and then you can tighten that up if you want. You can redose about 60-90 minutes after, whenever your blood sugar goes above 180. Start by taking a 4-unit dose when your CGM alarms. If you're a big guy, you'll probably need to take 8 units, or so. So you can do these little taps is the point. And even if you don't get the initial dose right, an hour and a half later, you can kind of redose. And because it's inhaled, it's not that hard to do. So in this particular case, it was 8 units initially. CGM alarm went off, 4 units, and just kind of, look how quickly you can kind of turn these tides around with a truly rapid-acting insulin. So let's do a case. This person's name is Doug. And what's Doug's deal? Well, he's just a super awesome dude. I mean, just salt of the earth, just really, just a great guy. Type 1 diabetes for 20 plus years, doing well on insulin pump and CGM with A1C. That's none of your damn business. Does have semi-frequent episodes of hypoglycemia, frustrated by slow onset of our rapid-acting insulins and prolonged duration of action. So Doug continued. He talks about starting Afrezza with his provider. And I should stop there, because this very likely is something that you will have to bring to your provider. Providers know about it, but this is an underutilized medication in general. It's under-discussed. So do not be afraid if you think that this is something you want to try to discuss with them. And if they say no, they probably have reasons in discussing that with them why they think this would or would not be a good option for you. This is not necessarily for everybody, but it's something that you should bring up to your provider, because they might honestly just forget about it as something to discuss with you. So SIM for spirometry, which is normal. What does that mean? Well, before starting Afrezza, you need to show that you have normal lung function. This drug has shown that there's no adverse effect in the lungs. It doesn't cause lung damage. It doesn't cause lung cancer. But if you have some underlying undiagnosed lung condition, we need to know about it before we start you on it. If you have underlying severe asthma or COPD, if you're a current smoker, you should not use it. So spirometry is you literally just breathe in a tube, and you see how much air you can force out in 1 second. And if that's normal for your height and weight, then you're good to go. Most type 1s, including Doug, you can start on a combination pack of 4s and 8s. Some 4s, some 8s. Or you can start on a combination packs of 4, 8s, and 12s and kind of figure out what you need or use more. But there are these combo packs. Some more dosing stuff for Doug. Take the Afrezza at the beginning of the meal or even 10 to 15 minutes after you eat. Again, very different than our current rapid-acting insulins. Because it starts working so quickly, you don't want to take it half an hour before you eat. Again, I would absolutely recommend Humalog and Novolog. You do take it 30 minutes before you eat. Not the case with Afrezza. Start by taking 4 units for small meals and snacks, and maybe 8 for larger meals is a good general ballpark, information. Set your CGM high alarm for 180 and take a second dose when your alarm goes off. Start by making this dose around 4 units. For corrections, start by seeing how much 4 units drops you, and here's how. So you want to know, what is my correction dose for the Afrezza? And I gave you some kind of formulas for figuring that out. But the best way to do that is just pick a time that your blood sugar is high. In this case, blood sugar of 250. I actually took 8 units, so my blood sugar was 240. And then just watch and don't eat. Try not to do any exercise, whatever. Just see how quickly it brings you down and how far it brings you down, and that can give you a correction dose. So it went down to 80. So in this case, 8 units dropped me 160 points, meaning that 4 units would drop me 80 or so, which was about that calculation that we did earlier. But do this over and over again, and it'll give you an idea. So you know, oh gosh, when my blood sugar is above 240, I need to take an 8 to correct. And if it's somewhere between 180 and 240, then maybe I just do 4. You'll learn the more that you do this kind of how much of a correction you need to do. So it's very different than our 1 unit to 50, 1 unit to 40, whatever. It's more just, what is a 4 and 8 going to do for me? I already showed these pictures of what it looks like. Another example of me with a 350 blood sugar. Trust me, this doesn't happen all the time, but it does every once in a while. So this was my CGM. or sorry, I should say Doug's CGM. And Doug gets a text when his blood sugar's down here. And it's from our good friend, Dr. Steve Edelman, who is following Doug's information on Share so he can see Doug's real-time CGM information. And he's like, hey, Doug, did you take 8 or 12 units of Afrezza? And Doug said, thanks for keeping an eye on me, 12. And the point with this is that just by looking at this, Dr. Edelman could tell that this was Afrezza. You don't see this kind of rapid improvement or change in blood sugars with anything other than maybe IV insulin. You would see that, but short of doing that, Afrezza is as close as we've got. So that was the point of this little fun exchange. So lost Doug, no reward. He's very shy. Do not chase. Doug continued. Eventually switched off to a pump to basal insulin. So there's no right or wrong way to do this. Some people. So when I start people on Afrezza, I say stay on whatever you're on. You're on your pump. You're on your hybrid closed loop system, you're on your shots, whatever it is, stay on it. I don't want to make any radical changes. Let me prescribe Afrezza as additionally an add-on for you to see how you like it. Maybe you just start with just using it for corrections, and maybe you stop there. You just want to have it around as an as needed for those stubborn highs. Maybe you start using it for mealtime. Maybe you like it so much that you decide to come off your pump and use basal insulin and Afrezza only. There's no wrong way to do it. And people will find their best place to use it. Now, Doug was using Afrezza exclusively for all meals and corrections. A1C has improved slightly, as had time and range, and no change in spirometry. Technically, you're supposed to get this spirometry test done again after 6 months after starting, and then yearly thereafter, just to make sure that it hasn't changed. Now, this slide, I clearly didn't fill out all the way, but these are practical questions that come up. So is it available for kids? No, but studies are underway. So meaning it's not approved for people less than 18 for kids. That being said, I don't think it's in its current dosing will ever really be the drug of choice for your 4, 5, 6-year-olds that are very insulin sensitive, and even 4 units might be a little bit too much. Certainly when you get into adolescence and the teenage years, you can become very insulin sensitive, and it becomes more practical to use this. And certainly kids could benefit from this as much as anybody. In terms of rapidly correcting blood sugars, kids can eat a ton of carbs in one setting or one day, hundreds of grams of carbs. So having something to combat that can be actually really meaningful. So I'm excited to see where that'll go. Can you get it with Medicare? And the answer is yes. It can be expensive, especially if it's not covered, but you can proceed with it. If it's not covered, there are these kind of plans available through the company that your provider can talk to the local rep about, or you can go to the booth here at the One Conference and ask them about, hey, I'm on Medicare. What's the best way to kind of proceed with getting this? Can you use it in addition to your other insulins? Yes, meaning that if you're on a pump, you can still use it. Where this comes up the most is for these hybrid closed loop systems. What happens if I'm taking Afrezza? Does it mess up my total daily dose, or does it mess up the algorithm? If you're on a system that's automatically trying to correct your blood sugars like Control-IQ or Loop or the 670G, it's already trying to bring your blood sugars down when you're high. You can still use Afrezza to correct, because in my opinion, these algorithms are not aggressive enough. So you can still use Afrezza to correct, and you might have to just be a little less aggressive with your Afrezza dose. But I found that they work actually really well in combination with pumps and these hybrid closed loop systems. And the last question is just, if anything comes up, you can definitely write in the TCOYD. Go talk to the folks at the booth today. Go to the Mankind Afrezza website, but a lot of information also on the TCOYD website. So summary with Afrezza, I spent a lot of time about this one, but it's important. You can either use for all meals or intermittently. Intermittent use, ideal to correct blood sugars rapidly or when eating high carb meal. Can be on pumps, MDI, multiple daily injections, or continuous subcutaneous insulin infusion. So you can either be on shots or pumps is what I should have written. Use of a CGM is highly recommended to maximize the titration and benefit. Recommend CGM period for all type 1s, but especially when you go on Afrezza so you can see the time course of the action. Take it at the start of the meal or just after eating. So the timing is different also. And you might need 2 doses for most meals. So clearly there's a lot of things that are different about how to dose this the right way. But it's worth talking about because if you go onto it, you need to know these things to be successful with it. And if you're equipped with these tools, you can do very, very well. So important to take that time. All right, we're leaving Afrezza behind. So there's some other new kids on the block, and these are called Fiasp and Lyumiev. And what are these? So these are basically the next iteration of Humalog and Novolog. So Fiasp is the next generation of Novolog, and Lyumiev is the next generation of Humalog, literally. They've taken these same molecules and just added what we call excipients to the solution to make them get absorbed a little bit faster. So there's good news and bad news about Fiasp and Lyumiev, especially when compared to Afrezza. So the bad news is that these still, in my opinion, are nowhere near as fast as Afrezza is in terms of rapid on, rapid off. So these are more kind of minor advancements in the previous Humalog Novolog. So that's the bad news. The good news is because they're only kind of an incremental advance, that you don't have to change anything you're doing with your dosing, with your carb ratios, with the settings in your pump, your insulin timing. You would just switch out to these insulins and get the benefit of a little bit, faster acting onset without really having to relearn how to dose insulin altogether. So that is the bad news, good news of these insulins. So let's talk about them a little bit. So both of these have shown a little bit better blood sugar control after meals. So this is actually Fiasp, and what they did is they took a bunch of type 1s, gave them a set meal, what we call a mixed meal tolerance test that has some fats and proteins and carbs in it, gave them a standardized bolus of insulin with either Novolog in gray or Fiasp here in blue. And what you can see is that for the same meal with the same dose, that after 1 hour and 2 hours with Fiasp, the blood sugars were lower. So 21 milligrams per deciliter and 12 milligrams per deciliter. So is this a cure? No. Is this a grand slam? No. But it's a little bit different, and the approach might be, well, I've been using Novolog forever. Why don't I try this and see if I notice any difference with Fiasp? Now, Fiasp comes in pens, and it comes in vials, and it is approved to use as shots or in a pump. So you can put these in any pump system that you're currently using. This is approved for both. Now, Lyumiev is the newest kit on the market that just came out here in 2020. Same deal. But now the next version of Humalog. It is Humalog, with just some extra excipients added to it that makes it get absorbed a little bit faster. Same kind of test, Humalog versus Lyumiev. This is a different study, though, different dosing, different patients, so you can't really compare head-to-head versus Fiasp. But at 1 hour and 2 hours, the blood sugar with Lyumiev compared to Humalog was about 30 milligrams per deciliter lower. So again, it's not going to blow your socks off, but 30 milligrams per deciliter lower at 2 hours is, I think, meaningful, because that might be just enough that you might not have to do a correction bolus. So that's the difference between a blood sugar of 210 and 180. And at 180, you might just let it ride and see if it kind of comes down. And at 210, you might get, annoyed and do that rage bolus and then kind of get back on the roller coaster again. So clearly having better post-meal blood sugars is better for your overall glucose control, but it helps you avoid that correction dose, which is usually what can make you go low. Most lows come after a high. You're high, you overdo it, you go low. So both Lyumiev and Fiasp are better in terms of faster acting compared to the previous Humalog and Novolog. So bottom line for these guys, a little bit faster. Don't change anything if you try it. I guess kind of a why not approach. Talking to your provider, hey, I've been on Novolog and Humalog forever. What's the deal with these guys? And they might, just say, yeah, give it a try and let me know. If you don't notice any difference, maybe we go back on the old one. But maybe you come back and say, yeah, geez, I feel like my blood sugars are turning off or turning around a little bit. It takes the edge off your highs and help you turn that corner a little bit quicker. So obviously, this is the end of the Fiasp Lyumiev part. You can see I didn't have to spend 30, 40 minutes talking about how to dose it. So that is the positive. The negative is that you might not notice much of a difference because it's not as truly different as Afrezza is. All right, and ending with basal insulin, it says don't forget about me. I know probably a lot of people tuning in are on pumps. They don't use basal insulin, but the vast majority of type 1s in the country use shots. So a lot of people are out there using basal insulin. And forever we've had Lantus, which is a great insulin, but we have some improvements in them. And those improvements are called Toujeo. These names, I'm sorry. Lyumiev, Fiasp, Toujeo, Tresiba. So Toujeo and Tresiba. So these are both new basal insulins, and they're pretty equivalent in terms of head-to-head, but they are both better than Lantus, for sure. They both are more consistent across 24 hours. Sometimes we have people on Lantus have to take it twice a day, morning and evening. I wouldn't do that with these because they're so consistent. So you can truly do once a day dosing. You can dose it at any time of day. They both have shown less hypoglycemia compared to Lantus. So I think that any type 1 on shots should be on one of these basal insulins. They are, more consistent. Tresiba is a 1-to-1 conversion. If you're on 20 units of Lantus, just do 20 units of Tresiba. Toujeo, you might notice that you need 20% or so or more when going from Lantus to Toujeo. So if you're on 20 units of Lantus, you might need 24, 25 of Toujeo, something like that. But otherwise, it's a really straight, easy conversion going from Lantus to one of these. These slides, let me focus on the top one because I think it makes the point a little bit better. This is the time course in the dotted line of Lantus over a 24-hour period. That it actually does have a little bit of a peak, and then after 12 hours or so, it starts to kind of wane. And this is a problem because if you're getting a different amount of insulin in your system in the morning versus evening, it can affect your blood sugars, and you don't know if it's your basal or your bolus or whatever. So the inconsistency in Lantus can be a little bit of a problem compared to Toujeo, which has a very flat amount of insulin in your system across 24 hours. You only need to dose it once a day. Don't have to worry about splitting the dose, anything like that. And this bottom slide is just showing the same thing with Tresiba, that different doses based on your weight. You get what we call a flat profile, meaning that the amount of insulin that's in your system at 8 a.m. is the same as it is at 8 p.m. And that's important because that's what you want from a basal insulin, consistent insulin delivery across a 24-hour period. So what you need to know about these is if you have type 1 and take basal insulin, you should use Tresiba or Toujeo. That's important. Why? Much more consistent, which means less hypos, can count on getting the same amount of insulin throughout the day, more flexible dosing, can take it any time of day. And this is important especially for you guys that maybe have frequent episodes of DKA, you're forgetting to take your insulin, things like that. Having them last a little bit longer can be helpful. So basically, ending this talk is saying, today's a new day in terms of insulin. I just went through 5 different new insulins in the last handful of years here, starting with Afrezza, truly different rapid on, rapid off, inhaled insulin. Then we have Lyumiev and Fiasp, new kind of more traditional rapid-acting insulins that you can put in pumps. I didn't mention that Lyumiev is not approved for a pump yet as of giving this talk now in almost October 2020. But by the end of the year, maybe early next year, it's supposed to be approved for pumps. It does come in a vial, though. And then the Toujeo and Tresiba, the new basal insulin. So definitely being up to speed on these. I mean, insulin is your weapon, period, against diabetes. It's good to know about the latest and greatest. So all of these people are here at the one conference today. Check out information on Lyumiev, which is the Lilly Group, or Fiasp is with Novo Nordisk, and Toujeo and Tresiba also here as well with Sanofi and Novo Nordisk. So just go check out the health fair if you want more information. Definitely take this information to your provider, and trust me that some of these things can make a big, big difference. All right, take care. That's it for me on this topic. All right.